Well, Texas A&M has a huge game ahead of them in the nationally ranked number 11 Tennessee on Wednesday for the first round of the SEC tournament. And this is going to be a very competitive tournament. And just to go back to how the number 1 seed got named, it was through a coin toss, right? Which is so funny from the commissioner. And I think, you think, oh man, it's a coin toss, but there's coin tosses in a lot of sports. This is a very normal thing. And, you can definitely expect the South Carolina locker room to be blowing up after that, and Texas to have a little bit of like, oh man, like it is what it is. But I know Texas's attitude towards that was, you know what, we've already played every team, we already know what to expect, so we're gonna get by it. But funny that number 1 was considered by a coin flip. But the other teams who are playing in this first round do have a big challenge ahead, especially Texas A&M going up against Tennessee. So when you look at this game, what initially jumps out to you?
Oh my gosh. I love that question because I think the first thing anyone looks at is the fact that these two teams just recently played each other, top of the year, January 2nd. Tennessee took the cake on this one, 91-78. And when you look at a score like that, you're like, well, how do you bounce back? And how do you make a statement? Because that's what Texas A&M has to do. Well, let's find some positives for Texas A&M. They don't give enough credit for how they actually do well limiting their opponent's shots. And you're like, Casey, are you nuts? You just said 91 points went up to Tennessee. I'm getting there. They've got a very insane offensive number of offensive weapons when it comes to Tennessee, but they can pull on that a little bit more, limiting their opponent's shots and kind of commanding more of like their play at certain points. When you kind of look back over the season, you've seen Texas A&M kind of have these stronger points of play in the first quarter and in the fourth quarter, and they have the capability of having these fourth quarter pushes. So heading into this matchup, I'm thinking that they're thinking, okay, we can't show up in the second half of this matchup. We have to find a way to push Tennessee, make them uncomfortable in the first quarter, because the first quarter is Tennessee's sweet spot. That's where they make a statement. That's where they really come off offensively. They're better and well-rounded in the sense of being offensively strong and defensively sound, and they have a lot of depth on their team. That's what their reputation is. That's what they're known for. So Texas A&M has a chance to make it more interesting, but Tennessee is definitely the more well-rounded team heading into this matchup, looking to stack again versus Texas A&M.
Definitely. And it's hard when you're 0-9 on the road, and now when you get into the postseason, you don't have the luxury of having home games. You don't have the luxury of being in your own training room before the game and going to your own locker room and doing, the dances like Mallory was on earlier talking about. You don't have that luxury. So Texas A&M is going, they don't have a choice. They have to find a way to win on the road if they want to stay alive in this tournament. But what really impressed me is that this team, having lost that many games in a row, it can probably take a toll, not only on just the physical, what goes on the court, but also just the camaraderie and what goes on in the locker room. And I loved what Sahara Jones said, after their last loss. She was like, this isn't, you might think that there's drama going on and we're losing a lot, but really that's not the case. She said, We're all best friends. We love each other. We're going to play to the end. We're going to play to the buzzer. And I loved hearing that from her, because what that shows is not only that it's going well for them within the locker room from a friendship side, but also that this team cannot be counted out. When you have a group of girls who love each other, who care about the outcome of the game as much as what they're putting into it, that's really scary. And so that's when a team like Tennessee could get knocked off when they are also coming off their own losses as well. So we'll see. I think, like you said, if Texas can find a way to come out hot, Texas A&M can find a way to come out hot and show that, hey, you might overlook us and really shock them with the first punch.
Yeah. And plus, I think it's a great approach too, because, and again, this very well as a collegiate athlete. When you start watching game tape, you're looking for your opponent's weaknesses. So heading into this, Tennessee's going to look at Texas A&M and say, all right, they really don't collectively find their game as a unit until that third quarter or that fourth quarter, and we're hot coming out in the first quarter. So what an advantage we have. And if Texas A&M can push the pace in that first quarter and not lose their game, kind of try to force Tennessee out of their comfort zone. I mean, something else Texas A&M does pretty well, inconsistently, but well, is they can kind of create sloppy shots and sloppy shooting lanes. They can kind of change the characteristic of their opponent, and that's what they have to do early on in this matchup. But I love that you mentioned the conversation probably taking place in the locker room for Texas A&M, because it speaks to their ability to stay in games or to have that punch in the fourth quarter, but more importantly, how they just kind of can rally together. And that means that you can talk to your teammate from a very honest perspective and say, okay, we can't sit on our heels until the second half. We've got to have that power and that gusto in the first half, and you can have an honest conversation and bring the best out of each other. So it's not out of reach. Like I said, Tennessee
it's
very
a long
strong.
shot.
Exactly.
But it's not impossible. You're saying there's a chance.
I'm saying there's a chance.
That's what I was looking for. That's good. Well, and even just the outside factor too is neither team is going to overlook each other. But who do they play next? Who does the winner play next? Vanderbilt,
right?
Who is Tennessee's rival and who is also a team that Texas A&M really wants to get back this game. And so you can just imagine that if Tennessee has their eyes set on the next game and isn't focused on Texas A&M and maybe we can roll over them, I can just imagine how that might, play a factor into the game plan and the focus of what is to come.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. It just kind of reminds me of what your sister just mentioned. Like, it's one game at a time, right? So even though the rivalry is there, you can imagine that Tennessee might be getting ahead of themselves a little bit because they could underestimate what Texas A&M brings into the matchup. So the biggest thing for Texas A&M as well is like keeping a pace on Jewel Spear. I mean, she's somebody who sits north of 25 points, makes it look pretty easy, but then you also got Samara Spencer who comes in very heavily and helping defensively for this Tennessee team. So it's just pushing their comfort zone, and that can make things interesting. And that's why March Madness and these tournaments, they're so interesting because you really can't favorably lean in one direction or another because almost anything can happen sometimes.
And Spear is one of 7 seniors on Tennessee's team, which is, when you think about a basketball roster, that's like a lot of the team, right? 7, and for 7 of them to be seniors, like
a lot
you
of
go into
experience.
postseason, and that's some of their end. Like each game could be the end of your career, right? And so there's just a different level of emotion, a different level of younger girls playing for your seniors when you hit this point, especially for it to be one of your top scorers, right? The girl who is really carrying the team on your back. And so I'm excited really for both of these teams, for their leaders to be those seniors, those grad students, and to see, hey, what is it going to take to get over the hump, not overlook the next opponent, and do the job.
Yeah, well, Tennessee's got that depth. They're a very high-tempo team also. And then who's not playing their heart out for Kim Caldwell right now? I mean, I think everyone on that roster is probably just in awe of their head coach. So I think that that's probably something else that's going to give Tennessee a little gusto in this matchup.
I'm excited. Well, Tennessee, I just loved seeing Kim and having, her come back with her child and all those things and how exciting that was. So we'll see what ends up happening. But I just love rooting for Tennessee just with that and that camaraderie and what she's really brought to this team. But so excited to just get into March Madness. I can't wait to make the brackets and all the things. And when do you usually start your bracket, search?
Oh my gosh, I think probably like week 2. I got to see how the first week of March paints out, and then I start going nuts with the brackets. We're going to do some bracketology here on Respect Your Game.
Good. Well, I'm excited, and we'll have to keep you updated with the new polls after all these conference championships. But thank you so much for tuning in to Respect Your Game. What a fun episode. Casey, it is always a joy. This is Respect Your Game. Catch us every Tuesday.